My 95-year-old guest is a senior Olympics champion and world record setter. Stay tuned to meet Don Pellman.
Welcome to The Better Part, a program that encompasses a diverse spectrum of topics important to our community, which we hope will both inform and entertain you. We invite you to sit back and enjoy the program.
My guest, Don Pelman, is a senior Olympics champion and world record setter. Welcome to the program, Don.
Glad to be here.
You've been creating a lot of excitement at the Senior Olympics. Tell us first of all about the Olympics, the Senior Olympics. What are they and so forth?
Well, I didn't know what they were until my oldest son 25 years ago said, "Why don't you try the Senior Olympics?" And I said, "What is it?" And he said, "It's something that goes on all over the country and for people 50 and up in 5-year brackets." So I looked locally and found out we had a local meet coming up, and so I entered and did real well, and that was the beginning of 25 years of Senior Olympics.
Oh my goodness.
And 25 states too.
So they have it like in a different state every year?
Every state has a meet at least once a year, and then there are local meets, and then there are national meets every second year, and then there are a few international meets, and so there's always plenty to see and to do.
So tell us about what happened in Colorado.
Well, when I was 90 years of age, I visited my nephew who lives in the Denver area, and we had a meet at the state meet was in Fort Collins, Colorado, and I entered that first time I had entered a meet in Colorado, and it was a 2-day meet, which is an unusual thing. Most of them are 1 day, and this 2-day meet I had 8 events, and I set records in 7, and we had certified people there to okay, all the marks that I had made, and they were submitted into the national committee and accepted, and finally the international committee. And so it was rather unusual to have anyone set more than 1 world record in a day, and I had set 7, so that was my high point of the career, I guess.
So some people would just maybe set 1 record because they specialize in 1 event, but you did 8? You did 8 events?
Yeah, most people that specialize in the dashes do nothing but the running. And the same way with people who throw the weights or do the jumps or the pole vault, they do 1 thing. Dr. Bell from Arkansas is a pole vaulter and been setting world records, but that's the only event he does. And I ran into a javelin thrower from St. Louis, and that's all he ever did. So when I entered meet and then did the runs, the 100 and the 200, and high jump, long jump, triple jump, and the pole vault, and the weights, why it was unusual for anybody to compete in that many events. But I had done the same in the national meet at Tucson, Arizona, a couple of years before that, and was the only one out of 10,000 entries in all sports. Of course, there's swimming and bowling and golf and all that stuff, but track and field is the most popular, and there were 10,000 entrants in the total thing, and I was the only one in the whole group that came back with 8 gold medals.
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! That's wonderful.
Another high point of my career, I guess.
And then you have set world records. Do you break your own records then?
Sometimes. Yeah, unless if you don't have at my age group, sometimes you have no competitors, so you're competing against the clock, and that's always been my goal, because once you get over 80 or 85, your competitors group is getting to be smaller. In a national meet, even at 80, we had something like 30 and 35 competitors, and in the running events, you had semifinals and finals before you preliminary events. But once you get into the state meets and older brackets, you sometimes have very few competitors, so you're trying to beat your own record because you have no competitors to compete against. Many times you compete against younger ones. They combine the 85, 90, and 95 group together in order to fill out the agenda and so forth. So anyway, it varies from meet to meet. So I've been into over 100 meets over the last 25 years, so it's quite an experience.
I heard that you have won over 800 medals.
Yeah, 800, and they're all gold except 5. I've never competed in an event in which I did not get a medal, which is rather unusual because you end up with a flu or bug or a cold or a twisted ankle. But I've always lucked out pretty well and been able to compete. So I've competed a couple times and I wasn't feeling at the top level, but always made out pretty well.
Were you in athletics in school?
I did a little bit in high school, but I was a depression kid and had a paper route. I couldn't compete in sports, but I did play a little basketball on a church team, played a little baseball, softball. And then I went on to college and I was track and field there. The only thing I did there was a high jump, and in those days I did have a part-time job there too, and so that career didn't amount to much. So from about 1934 and for about 35 years I had nothing in the way of track and field until my son talked me into the Senior Olympics. So.
Well, did you do any other sports? Just
I bowled a little bit, and I played a little tennis and a little golf, but I never really concentrated on too much.
How did you learn to do all that? How to pole vault?
Just by trying it. And the sad part is that I really needed a coach and a trainer, and I never did have it. I think I could have done far better if I had, you know, a trainer or a coach. And of course, the difficult events are pole vaulting and high jumping. You have to have some place to practice that, and the only chance you get on the average was to go to the high school track and field area and get permission to try the pole vault, and that was only a few weeks a year. So the high jump and the pole vault are very difficult to do much practicing. You can always run and you can do some jumping and you can throw the weights, but pole vaulting and high jumping are very difficult to do any training or practice with.
So I would assume that most of these men competing in this Senior Olympics probably had a lifetime of, you know, doing these events and maybe being coached. So you went in just cold and outdid them all. Just think what you could have done if you'd started out young. You could have been an World Olympics winner, I'm sure. I'm wondering now what kind of work you did in your younger years when you were working.
I was
a
machine shop tool and die maker. I served an apprenticeship and then worked for General Motors, and I got into the Apollo program and became a supervisor and finally a superintendent of the department, and spent all my life in a machine shop and on some very interesting programs. During the war it was supercharger planes, and that because they were so vital, they gave me deferment, so I never did into the service. I always feel a little bit guilty about the fact that I was a healthy young fella and never served in the armed forces, but they kept giving us deferments. So I spent my whole life, working life, in a machine shop.
Did you say you worked on the Apollo?
Yeah, we worked the Apollo program for many years, and we did a vital part. The General Motors division that I worked for was not an automotive division. We did guidance and navigation for the Air Force and for the government, and we did the guidance and navigation for the Apollo program, so we were quite involved.
Well, I think you served your country well.
Well, I think so, and it was an interesting occupation.
Do you have like tips for anybody who would want to begin, who's never done the Olympics before? Do you have any tips for them?
I found out in my own experience that I was not in very good shape. My first meet, I came home as a basket case. I entered only 6 events and I won them all. against the state champion of all things, he encouraged me to go to that first meet, and I couldn't understand how I beat him in a 100-meter dash and a few other things. But when I got ready to go home, I could hardly get into the car. And I thought, if I'm going to compete in this sort of thing, I'm going to have to get a routine, and it has to be a year-round routine. It can't be a seasonal thing. Even though most Olympic meets are in the summer months, I did something all year round. You have to do something on a weekly basis, at least 2 or 3 times a week. And so I tried to do my events winter or summer and keep in shape. And in doing that way, just kept the weight down and try to keep in shape the best you can.
Do you have plans to do more Olympics? More
I doubt there'll be many more because of 2 things. First, my wife's health is marginal, and I have to be close to her if I can. And the cost, and most meets are out of town, so it costs you transportation and motel, hotel rates.
It's a big hassle now, isn't it?
Plus the entry fees, of course. So over the 25 years, I invested quite a bit of my own money in going to meets and entering meets and so forth, but I thought it was well worthwhile.
You're an inspiration, really. Now, if someone wanted to enter, how would they enter?
Almost every state Olympic committee has an email address, and you can find out what the meets are. There usually are regional meets, 4 or 5 per state, plus a state meet every year, and as I said before, a national meet every 2nd year. And you can get an entry blank and enter most of these meets without too much of a problem.
What's it like? Now, they last, you said 1 day, and sometimes 2.
Most meets are 1-day meets, and they're all bunched up in early morning. You start at 8 o'clock in the morning. At one meet, I remember in Fort Smith, Arkansas, I had 14 events all in one morning. I came home with 14 gold medals that day. They had what they call fun events, you know, the speed walking, baseball and football throwing, and a few things that I never really consider Olympic events. But they gave medals on it, and I entered all that stuff. And came home with another basket case that day. I had to stop on the way home and rub my muscles so I could drive the car. But the local meets are always 1-day meets. State meets are sometimes 2 or 3 days. The national meet was a 3-day meet. And then they have one up in Utah called a Huntsman International meet, and that's a 3-day meet, and it's international. They have 30 or 40 different countries represented. I've been in that one a couple of times and did real well in that also. So I've been in about 3 or 4 international meets. We had a start of one that was supposed to be an annual affair 1 year in San Francisco and 1 year in Australia, and after 1 or 2 years they ran out of money and didn't continue it. But I was in that international meet, plus the ones in Huntsman. And always have been of much interest, and it's kind of nice to not only win a medal in a state meet or a national meet, but an international meet. It sounds a little bit more interesting.
Yeah. Well, the whole world knows you then, all these people.
I don't know about that. I do
athletes,
email
sure.
a good friend in Germany and one in Australia, and I never competed overseas, but there are meets all around the world.
Now, the day of the event, so everyone arrives there early, and then how does it work? They probably give you a brochure that tells you.
They give you a number.
And
then you have to go to each event. They give you a schedule. You go to the event and sign in, and they usually have, like in the 100-meter dash, they have heats, and they usually run the women first, and it varies. Sometimes they take the older ones first, sometimes they take the younger ones first. And sometimes you have a complication of 2 or 3 events happening at the same time. So you're ready to run the 100-meter dash, and you're due to throw the shot put, so you go over to the shot put place and you tell them I'm running the 100, how about giving me a standby, and you get an okay to compete a little bit later. So sometimes it's a little bit scary, but I've always been able to get them in okay. And meets are usually run by amateurs, you know, high school and college kids, and sometimes they're done really professionally, and sometimes it's pretty bad. But it is interesting, and it varies a lot from state to state, and I had some favorite ones. And luckily, most of the ones that I liked a lot, Missouri and Oklahoma and Arkansas meets were most of the ones that I did every year. And I did the Arkansas meet about 20 years in a row, and that was probably my most active area. But I did get to other states. I've covered most of the South, all the way from Florida to Louisiana and Alabama and Arizona. And my sister lived in Hawaii, and I went over there for their first meet, and I got this medal, which is something unusual because it's a wooden medal.
Beautiful. It looks like, is it
made
teak?
of koa wood.
Oh,
and
okay.
So I went over there on their first meet. It was the weekend after Thanksgiving, and I did real well there. I won each event over there. So that was my furthest trip. I competed in California several times, Nevada, Utah, Wisconsin, my old hometown. I've been up there a couple of times. So all in all, quite a bit of travel and quite a bit of competition.
When you go on these things, do you do a little sightseeing while as long as you're there?
Yeah, most of the places I either have relatives or friends. So in Wisconsin, I still have relatives and friends there. In Colorado, I had my nephew there. But some areas like Kentucky, Elizabethtown was where they had their state meet, and I didn't know anybody there. Evansville, Indiana, didn't know a soul there. But one day drive and one day meet, and then drive home the next day. And my wife said, "How do you make out?" Well, I came out with 8 more gold medals to add to the collection. And shirts, we always get a T-shirt, and I had 80, some of them hanging up in the garage. I had so many T-shirts from the Olympics that I didn't know what to do with them all, and gave them away. But this one, my grandkids gave me after my first state meet, and I kept adding the state championships to it until it filled up. And
you have some on the back too.
yeah, in the back I've got something about the national meet in Tucson, where I had 8 gold medals and 5 were national records and 2 were world records. So that was my first really successful big meet.
Do you get nervous before you start your competition?
Not too much. I thought I would, especially on the dashes and stuff like that, but it never bothered me too much. I thought, you know, do the best you can, and I don't recall ever getting nervous. I was more concerned about weather conditions, like the meet in Tucson, for instance. It was a May meet, but we had 104 degrees on the track, and the one at Baton Rouge in Louisiana was a pretty hot day. But luckily we had a field house that we could cool off in, and the events were in the track, and then you could go back into the field house to cool off. But temperature can be a problem if you're, especially in the longer events. I never did the long runs, the miles and the half miles, but these people that, you know, are 70, 80, 90 years of age, and they try to run a mile in that temperature, and to me, it seems a kind of an unfair thing, because if you run a mile and it takes you 5 or 6 minutes, you get the same gold medal that the shot put guy does, and it takes 2 seconds to do the event, you know. So it's a very mixed bag, I guess.
So you become well acquainted then with some of these competitors, I guess, if you see them.
A couple of them got to know me pretty well. I would know them by their sight, but one fellow said, "I'm getting sick of looking at your back." But anyway, we did have good fellowship, and you do run into some of the same competitors.
So like some people would just run in their state, that, I mean, they would compete only in their state. Not everyone travels like you do.
Yeah, that's right.
Then.
Yeah, some people just are local, either because of cost of travel or for some other reason, but there are some people that make a hobby of it and spend the whole summer going from one meet to the other. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, with the number of medals I've got, if that's how it rates with somebody that really wanted to do an awful lot. You run into people that are quite competitive, and I've run into an ex-Stanford athlete who now lives in San Diego area, that he and his wife are top in their field, and they're about 15 years younger than me, in their 80s, 70s, late 70s and 80s, but they go to a lot of meets all around the world at all the various times of the year. Mm. So it can be a hobby or a avocation, I guess, whatever you want to call it.
Who started the Olympics and how long have they been going?
At first it was a kind of a melange of different events, and they finally got all states to get together to get some standards, because some places were running a 100-yard dash instead of a 100-meter dash. Some of them were adding other oddball events, and so they finally got everybody together. Now all 50 states and the District of Columbia has a senior Olympic committee, and they're all standardized on their events, and they keep their records and do it in a organized way. Mm-hmm. So it's the biggest amateur event in athletics, Senior Olympics.
Well, how did you feel when you got your very first gold medal?
Well, that was that first meet. I thought it was kind of unusual. I had no idea how I'd make out, but the very first event and the very first meet was the 100-meter dash, and I was against the state champion. And that was the only meet my wife has ever been to anyway, and she watched as we came to the finish line. It was neck and neck, and he stumbled and fell at the finish line on a track that was sandy, and he got pretty well scraped up. And she said, "Boy, I know this is a dangerous sport, but there haven't been too many injuries that I noticed. You know, there are sore muscles, of course. You can always have some injuries, but only one really sad event that I remember. That was in Jonesboro, Arkansas. I competed in an indoor meet against some people that I had competed in before, and this fella at the finish line of the dash collapsed and died on the spot, and his wife was there and said this is what he had in mind. He knew he had a bad heart. So that was the only real sad thing, but there usually is paramedics at the meet to help you out. If you got problems, I've already had to have ice bags and massages to help out to get through things, but basically I have never been injured or had a real bad problem. And I've never had any joint problems. You know, most football players or athletes end up with knee injuries, ankle injuries, hip injuries, mm-hmm. and ends their career. And as a 175-year-old, 75-pound person, I shouldn't be doing well in the weights, the shot put and the discus. But the people that are heavy enough and big enough to throw those weights end up as a basket case at an early age, it seems. Mm-hmm. So I've won the shot put and discus fairly easily in most meets, which is kind of unusual, I think. This medal is kind of interesting because when I went to Hawaii, they etched a special thing out of a cliff dwelling thing. I don't know if you can get that out and look at it. But anyway, that's the only wooden medal I had, made of koa wood. Mm-hmm. And they announced at the beginning of the meet that since these were so expensive to produce, they were going to limit it to 3 or 4. And I had won 6 events, and so they gave me second place medals for the other one.
Oh.
And then at the closing ceremonies at the end of the meet, they gave me one more like this, etched with gold, because I was a high point man in the meet, so that was unusual.
Oh,
and my sister, who had never seen me in the Olympics, was living there and was very proud of me because I came all the way over to Hawaii at Thanksgiving to see her and won the meet there. That was their first meet that Hawaii had. Now they've had them every year since that time, and I've never been back beyond that. This one is an interesting medal because I got that last year at Stanford. It's the heaviest and biggest one I ever got. But most of the medals are some of them were pretty junky, some are even plastic, but I do think they at least should be brass plated so they look like gold. And so and some of them don't have too much gold on them, but I try to, on the better ones, I try to put something on the back to remind me of how or where I won the medal.
That's a
and
good
what my
idea.
performance was. But I had a whole box full when we moved from Wisconsin. I gave a whole box full to my son who stayed there. I said, make some kind of a display out of it. And I gave some away to all the people in my bowling league, and I gave them away to friends because I just had too darn many of them. And now I ended up with some of my favorites, but I figured once you get that many medals, why do you need any more? But
well, I hope you get a lot more. I hope you continue competing.
It gets pretty thin. Now, beyond 90, you'll find out that there are a few people that do events like if you take the shot put and don't drop it on your foot, why you might set a record.
Well, I was watching you on YouTube doing the pole vault.
Pole vaulting is the one that everybody is most amazed at. They say, "What? You're 95 years old and pole vaulting? Nobody pole vaults."
You got up there. You were over the
get
top.
over that thing. But it's amazing that there are quite a few women that pole vault. Of course, they don't go up too high, but they
especially when you didn't do it as a young person. You know, you started it late in life. It's just really amazing.
Well, pole vaulting is a combination of running and arm strength and timing, so it's a kind of a complicated thing. But maybe I'll give up pole vaulting at 96. I'm only had 2 more months before I hit my 96th birthday. We'll see how that goes.
Well, you certainly get a lot of attention with all the news people and the articles in the newspaper and
well, I was interviewed a couple of times way back in my Arkansas days. Springfield, Missouri was the closest TV stations, and they came down to Mountain Home and interviewed me and made a pretty nice program of my training and some of my events, and I got a recording of that. But I haven't been too many TV programs, but I've had quite a few newspaper articles and
well, you're on the internet. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed hearing about all this. We're really impressed. It's just wonderful that you can do this and that you enjoy it and you're so humble about it and everything. So thanks so much for coming.